Welcome back. I wanted to talk a little about a mendicant monk who I found very inspiring in my life. And it's interesting when you talk about a person's life, they've lived 60, 70, 80 years, so you can't really do much justice to their life. But I'd just like to share a little about him. I've never met him personally, but I came across his book called At Hell's Gate when I was going through a bit of a difficult time in my life, and so his life was very supportive, inspiring to me. His name is Claude Anshin Thomas. Claude Anshin Thomas. He's an American. So just a little. And I think the reason I want to share a little bit about him is because he's an example of the kind of shifts that we can make in our practice when we have had difficulty, where rather than trying to get away from our difficulty or fighting against our difficulty, instead we decide to work with it and let it actually inform us, and then when we do that, actually our difficulty can become the source of the most creative force and positive force in our life. So he was in the United States at the time of the Vietnam War, and as a young man he went to Vietnam and fought, and he acknowledges very openly that he caused the death of many, many people. And like many people, no matter what side of war that you're on, afterwards there's enormous suffering. Physical suffering, often from the scars and wounds of war, but more so the psychological suffering. Because humans, we're not evolved to harm each other, and it causes us mental harm when we do harm each other. No matter how much at the time that we might think that it's the right thing to do, when you have anger and hatred, and you just having that is bad for you, but then when you act on it, it causes sort of scarring in the mind. So, as happened to many veterans in all sorts of wars, he suffered terribly when the war was over, and was drinking and using drugs and acting out, committing crimes and being incarcerated and having difficulty maintaining relationships, and all of those things that many of us have heard about. At the same time, it's not the only thing, I'm sure, that was happening in his life. There was probably other things going on that were quite wholesome, but it was marked significantly by the post-traumatic stress, the recollections of what he had done and what he had witnessed, not just the pain he caused others, but also the fear he had for his own life and for the people that he cared about. And those kept coming back up into his mind over and over for years. So when I first was hearing about him, I felt like my life was kind of difficult, but maybe by comparison it wasn't nearly as difficult. But within the context of my own life, my life felt very difficult. And hearing about this person and how he, as I'll just describe in a few moments, how he, instead of keeping on trying to get away from this life and his history, how he was able to use it in the end for the good of many other people. So there are, of course, social workers and other veterans and other professionals trying to help him, as fortunately at least there are people who try to help veterans. And a social worker recommended that he try doing a retreat. This was in New York, which he did. And then how it came about, I don't really know, but he was invited to Plum Village in France, where Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery and retreat centre is. And of course there are many Vietnamese monks there. And he went there and trained there, which you can kind of imagine would be very confronting when you'd been an American soldier in Vietnam. Very confronting to be meditating with and studying with and working with people that for you triggered enormous guilt. But he didn't run away from that. He stayed with that. And that, I think, was what for me was so inspiring, is that at that moment where the pain would have been most visceral, most at the surface, he abstained from escaping into alcohol and drugs and so on. And he returned to the States and he took the precepts. He did Jukai with Bernie Glausman, who's passed away now, but he was a Dharma heir of Maizumi Roshi, sort of sister lineage to ours. And then he took up a life, and this was in his 40s, so it's also an example of how you can have one kind of a life that you could think of as maybe not so wholesome and fraught with lots of difficulties, and that even in your middle of your life you can turn to the Dharma. You can be like a flower that turns towards the sun. You can do that. It's never too late to do that. So he did Jukai, and then he was ordained, and then he has spent, I'm not sure what he's doing now, he must be in his late 70s, but then he spent the next few decades doing peace walks all around the world, and he's travelled over 30,000 kilometres on foot, going into different war-torn countries, either in war or have been in war, and talking to soldiers and civilians about peace, and that killing and fighting doesn't solve problems and just creates more and more pain. And he's travelled the world doing that, and no doubt has been a great inspiration to a huge number of people. It doesn't undo the harm that he did, but we can't ever undo the harms that we've done. We can't do that, but we can really make amends. We can work to make amends for the harms that we've done. And we can develop a lighter spirit about the mistakes that we've made, and understand that they come from they're the karma that come from all the causes and conditions. You know, he was raised in a family that glorified military life. He was 17 years old. How was he to know that that was not right, that the way his parents and his grandparents spoke? You know, he thought he was doing the right thing. He learned fairly quickly that he wasn't. So I'll read a little of his words. This is the book, The Hell's Gate. This section is called "Our Suffering is Not Our Enemy." Society teaches us that suffering is an enemy. We are constantly encouraged to reject what is unpleasant, disappointing, or difficult. What's all this suffering? Let's be happy. Let's have fun. But our suffering is not our enemy. It is only through a relationship with my pain, my sadness, that I can reach the other side, that I can truly know and touch the opposite, which is my pleasure, my joy, and my happiness. I often relate to my emotional suffering as though it were a physical pain. When I feel physical pain, society pushes me to take medication to relieve it, not to touch it, not to explore it or seek to understand it. I am conditioned to make every effort to avoid discomfort. I went through a long period of my life living from this conditioning. I took a lot of drugs, so many that I couldn't feel my physical pain or my emotional and spiritual pain. At the same time, it is also possible for me to touch genuine joy or healing. It was also impossible for me to touch genuine joy or healing or anything at all. It was just impossible. My body is covered with scars from my wars. Every time I look at my body, touch one of those scars, I touch again the reality of war. And when I touch the reality of war, I touch all the suffering that is intrinsic to war. In the past, when I felt pain from a scar, I tried to repress it, to hide it from myself. But the physical wounds are not the most significant wounds. The wounds of the soul, the spiritual wounds, the emotional wounds, they are far deeper, though less obvious, and they are much more unpleasant to look at. Can I imagine a time in the future when these scars and these experiences will dissolve, drop away, so that I will finally be free? This is not actually a condition of freedom. I am free now, right now, because I can acknowledge that the scars are there, because I no longer wish for them to be any different from what they are. So this is just an important little point right here, that our freedom isn't from when we are past all our suffering. Our freedom is to be able to fully witness and acknowledge our life right now and all the things that have happened in the past. To just be able to be fully with them and ready to work with them in whatever way is most wholesome. That's where the freedom is, right there. It's not later. The freedom isn't later. A little further on he writes, "The practices of mindfulness and meditation have provided me with invaluable resources and tools in those moments, in those hell places. They also help me to be able to go to those places with others, to support them in caring for and healing themselves. I am able to sit with the dying, the wounded, encouraging them to tell their stories and listening deeply. I also go to the front lines and talk to soldiers about not fighting. I talk candidly with them about the effects and consequences of war. I'm also able to go to the back wards of hospitals and mental institutions to visit the hidden casualties of war and listen to their stories. I sit with the disenfranchised, the social and cultural lepers, and listen. In all these places, with all these people, I practice breathing in and breathing out. I practice being fully present. And I offer them the tools of Zen Buddhist practice, direct experience, spiritual practice. I hope to help them discover the practices and tools that have helped save my life. Sitting meditation, walking meditation, mindful speech, and deep listening. I also hope to provide the experience of Sangha, community, to demonstrate how community can support us on the path to healing and the path of awakening. I invite people to bring an end to their isolation, because together we can do more than we can do alone. These tools, this practice of meditation, are important, even critical, because suffering is a reality of our lives, the lives of all of us. Yeah. So another thought that I had about this is an image of, rather than trying to fight against the flow of reality, the flow of life, we can imagine ourselves being more like a leaf that floats with the river. And a leaf floating down a river doesn't struggle. Like if you see a leaf floating down a river, it just floats down the river. It's not struggling. It's not having to paddle or anything. It just floats. And if the water is calm, it just moves very, very slowly. And if the water is a bit more turbulent, it bumps along. But it doesn't actually ever seem exactly agitated. A leaf just moves along with the water. So it's one way of looking at how do we just be with, if we think of the river as just reality, like however our life actually is, whatever our circumstances are, how do we move with it? How do we go with it rather than trying to get out of it or trying to go upstream, fighting against it? Can we just really see it for what it is? Because when we can see something just as it is, just take that little space to see something as it is, then we can have the wholesome thought of what action to take, what words to say, or how to understand it. I think the mistake that many of us make is that we jump too quickly. Something happens and we jump too fast into what should I say or do or think, because we maybe have aversion to whatever is going on. We don't like it. It doesn't have to be major, it can just be a mild thing, but we don't like it. We jump too fast to change it. So part of our meditation practice is to have space, to create mental space. So when something is happening, we've just got a little bit of mental space. See it for what it is. See what's happening. Maybe someone walks into the room and you can tell from their body language that they're agitated in some way. Rather than quickly going, oh my God, I must have upset them, I better go and appease them right now. Rather than jumping really fast to something like that, we might think, oh, they seem a little agitated. Just take space there and don't jump in too quick. Then we might decide to say or do something, but it's more likely to be helpful if we don't jump in with impulsively too fast, because when we jump impulsively, it's often fed by some of our unresolved, what we call it, or what's in the alaya vijnana, in our storehouse consciousness, or the unconscious from psychological terms, that sometimes has got a little bit of unresolved sort of neurotic distortions in it. We jump too fast. So our Zazen practice, just breathing in, just breathing out, gives us that space. It's a little like a leaf floating on the water. There's actually a koan that is a little about that. What page was it on? Case 80. In the Blue Cliff record. Jiao Zhou's newborn baby. A monk asked Jiao Zhou, does a newborn baby also have the sixth consciousness? The sixth consciousness is thinking mind. We've got the five consciousnesses, the five senses that we're familiar with, of eye, ear, nose, tongue and body, those five senses. And then in Buddhism we add the sixth sense of mind. The eye see, the mind thinks. So this monk asked Jiao Zhou, does a newborn baby also have the sixth consciousness? Jiao Zhou says, it's like tossing a ball on swift flowing water. The monk asked Tao Tzu, what is the meaning of tossing a ball on swift flowing water? Tao Tzu said, moment by moment to moment, non-stop flow. So this ball is a bit like a leaf. I kind of like to think of a leaf more than a ball, but it doesn't really matter. It's how we want to cultivate this moment to moment, non-stop flow. Everything is always flowing. Nothing is rigid. Nothing is stationary. So therefore nothing can be truly grabbed onto. So if we can contemplate how everything is in a state of constant flow, that nothing can be fixed or pinned down, then we can also learn to move in our mind, in this sort of a gentle flow with our mind. Things happen, we flow with them, we respond, things change, other things happen, things are happening, then they're not happening, and things are happening again, then they're not happening again, and we can flow like that. Our whole life is flowing like that. And that's a little bit like being like a baby. When babies are very, very little, before they've got language, not all the time, of course, babies can get terribly upset. They also can have just a very easy kind of present flow about them. So we want to cultivate that kind of mind that can flow and just move gently and respond, even when things as extreme as what is the life that happened for Claude Anshin Thomas. Still, even with that, he learned to move with it, and has been, a good example for all of us that we can do that too. So, see if anyone would like to ask any questions or make any comments online or in the Zendo. Fiona?
Oh, thank you, Neti. Just a thought that.
It's Fiona.
Oh, hi. Hi. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just take those words in, and I really appreciate you speaking about war, especially at this time of the year, and I'm kind of thinking about how when the soldiers returned and they from the Second World War, for example, and they decided to be quiet, not speak about their experience, um, and not affect their families. That that maybe maybe some of that comfort from being quiet, being peaceful was what they were wanting out of that. Yeah, just that. Thanks, Nettie.
Yeah. Yes, because there's different ways of being quiet, isn't there? There's being quiet that's kind of like suppressing, and Claude Anshin Thomas talks about this, that he couldn't talk about war because people around him just wouldn't understand what he went through. But that was a kind of a squashing down of not talking. But there's another way, which is to actually let it come up in the mind, let it fully be there in the mind, but be still with it, be open with it, and not have to react to it, just be with it. And I think all of us can practice that. I do that. I'll think of things that I've done that I regret in my life, and instead of going, don't think about that, let's go do something else, I can go, yep, that was not very skillful of me. And I can still see the ripple effects of those mistakes I made. I can be with it, give space to it. It's like we can float down the river together, a little collection of leaves. We can all float down together. Me and my memories of my mistakes can all float together, rather than trying to somehow get away from it. Yeah. Mark?
It's an interesting thought.
Speak up
sorry.
again.
I'm just thinking out loud. That if we wait for those regrets, those mistakes that we've made to actually resolve before we can be happy, move on. It's never going to happen.
Yes.
And it's just that acceptance it's the great leap forward really in our practices.
Yeah. Yep, to accept our shortcomings and our mistakes, and to do our best to make amends. But to do our best given everything else we're doing in our life, like even with our making of amends, we have to do it, I think, with a degree of gentleness towards ourselves, even if we're trying to fix mistakes we've made or just improve ourselves if we've got a certain tendency. Even that we should do with a kind attitude to it. But yes, we can't wait. If we wait, we'll be just waiting. We'll just be waiting.
Yeah.
I guess it was our level of consciousness at the time, wasn't it? And we can't, it was almost like we were a different person, we were at that level of consciousness when we
Yes.
made the mistake, making a good for our ego or something. And then you go along, and then as you go on in life, you get in different states of awareness and can see things with a bigger picture that you couldn't see when you made the mistake, I find.
That's right, yes. It's Fiona, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Fiona was just saying, if you couldn't hear that online, that when we were younger than we are now, we're always younger than we are now, when you think about the past, we weren't the same person as we are now. We only had the skills and the knowledge and the insights then that we had then. And in that sense, that is how it is for everyone all the time. People, we can only do what we can do given all the experience we've had up to this point and the way we understand things up to this particular point. So I think about the sorts of choices I made in my 30s, really different to the choices I would make now. Like really different. I wouldn't make those choices now. So we have to take that into account too when we're feeling a certain amount of guilt or just remorse, to really have compassion for the person then. The person then was confused.
It's not the person now.
Not the person now. No. And of course we can even do that on a very subtle level, in a very short time frame. You just said or did something that you don't feel good about it. Even straight after that, you're a new person. In a certain way, just straight after, the moment you go, oops, the moment you see that you made a mistake just back then, you're a new person. Already you have that opportunity to go, going to endeavour not to cut people off again, like say, for example. Going to endeavour not to just grab the last cake, or whatever it might be. Whatever the thing might be. I'm going to endeavour to not be late. I don't have that problem. I'm more likely to be too early. No, but whatever it might be. Even in the next moment we have a certain fresh freedom. It's another Buddhist teaching. Yes, Yi.
I just want to share one more thing. I say we accept whatever the hard things or mistakes we have in the past or currently. What I find is that also the attitude, how we accept it, makes a huge difference as well. Like we can accept it bitterly, but probably will make it even worse. But we can also accept it with more kind of grace to other people and to ourselves as well. As like everything has two sides. No matter how hard the situation is, there will be always some positive side to that thing as well. So if we more focus on that positive side, probably will make ourselves, others, easier to accept what's coming or what's the past. Yeah.
Yes. Even though it doesn't look like it, always we can find something that can be turned into something beneficial from a difficult situation. It can be hard to do that, but I don't think there's any situation that is just so totally and utterly deplorably terrible that nothing redeeming can come from it. I think there's always room, because every moment can be a moment for transformation. So, and I think that's the attitude to take when something has happened. To say, just what can I do to make this be transformative for me and for others? How can we work with it? It's what we've got. You know, when we can't change things that have happened. All right. I hadn't actually even registered that I thought of talking about this when yesterday was Anzac Day in Australia. It didn't even connect.
You've done it again.
I've done it again. I do this all the time.
Yesterday was what day in Australia?
In Australia, it's called Anzac Day. It's the day where we remember soldiers who fought in the First and Second World War, the New Zealand and Australian soldiers. And I just decided yesterday that I wanted to talk about Claude Anton Thomas, and didn't even click that it probably came up because yesterday was the day where Australians were remembering the veterans. Yes. All right, we'll finish with our closing chant and then do some prostrations. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become